There we go. This is all good. Hello, everybody. I'm going to pin myself very quickly. There you go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's Inkvent talk. It is the second night of Inkvent and all through the house. We're all silent because I've muted you all. We have a lovely talk tonight from Meg of Black Robin Pens. So she's done some incredible things. She's done the skateboard pen, which many of you will have seen. It was shared around fairly widely. It was incredible. Some brilliant pieces that are acrylic, and just you can all go and have a look over on her Facebook page on Black Robin Pens. I'll say it right at some point. So please do feel free to go and have a look over there on Facebook. It's incredible. I think it's Black Robin Pens by Maker Meg. And there's some brilliant pictures on there that you can see of the pieces that she's made. This evening, she's going to be doing a talk for you all on her process, the kind of things that she makes, making the skateboard pen and other interesting things, and will be, I think, doing a Q&A. So there we go. If you can unmute yourself now, Meg.
Sorry, just before we start, Meg, sorry, can we just announce the sponsor for this evening?
Oh, right, goodness, yes, I forgot. That's entirely my bad. Where is my document? Where's the sponsor document?
Okay, so the sponsor for the evening is Hamilton Pens.
Yes, thank you. There you go, I just found it.
And they have kindly gifted us 2 prizes for this evening, one of which is the I've struggled with that 2 nights in a row, haven't I? Quaco Christmas ornament in the 2022 colour pearl, and the second gift is a bottle of, I can't remember, it's Pilot Uroshizuku, and I can't remember.
It's Takesumi.
So there are 2 prizes, and we'll draw that randomly at about 9 o'clock.
Yes, thank you. I knew I'd forgotten something. The important thing. Right, so I will hand it on over to Meg, who I will make the spotlight. There we go.
Oh, lovely. All I can see is my own face now. Okay. So Apurva asked me if I would join your meeting and talk a little bit about myself. She gave me an outline of some topics that you may or may not be interested in hearing. I will start with just telling you a little bit about myself and about how I got into pen making, and then, you know, we'll deviate from there. But if we do a Q&A later, if there's anything that I didn't cover or anything that you want to know more about, please do feel free to ask. So I would say I started wood turning about 7 years ago, something like that. We just moved house, and my new house came with a small workshop attached to the garage, and an uncle actually gifted me an old lathe, sort of 50-something-year-old lathe, that was quite dangerous and quite fast. But I immediately got bitten by the bug and started wood turning everything that I could. For a couple of years, everybody got Christmas decorations, Christmas ornaments, angels, snowmen, Christmas trees, salt and pepper grinders, bowls, candlesticks, anything out of wood that I could make, I started doing. And it was actually at the biannual when things happen twice a year, the biannual wood turning and power tool show in Harrogate. I attended a few years ago with my mum, and she saw some pens that another turner had made that they were selling, and she said, oh, they happened to have this show in November, just in time for Christmas. And she said, oh, could you make me a pen for Christmas? And I said, no, I mean, I could, but I haven't got any of the kit, Mum. It would be, I'd have to buy quite a lot of stuff to get involved in that. And she said, I'll buy it. I'll buy you the pen mandrel. I'll buy whatever you need if you'll make me. She'd seen a piece of acrylic she loved. If you make me a pen in that for Christmas. So I was like, all right, seems a reasonable deal. And honestly, that's where it started. So I started turning kit pens as a hobby, for fun, but you quickly start accumulating those. There's only so many pens you can give people. There's only so many pens that you can use yourself. I was working with wood and acrylic at that point. The kit pens lend themselves well to wood because they're sleeved with like a brass sleeve, so nothing really moves. And obviously I had a background in wood turning, but you quickly realize, and most turners will realize, that you're restricted by sticking to quite a uniform pen shape. They come with a finial and they come with obviously the threads pre-made, and you're literally sandwiching the piece of wood that you've turned in between those. So obviously I got myself on YouTube and I started Googling and researching other ways to make pens and ways to modify kits, and came across a series of videos by a guy called Bob Blanford, who, if you're not familiar with him, he goes under RJB Woodturner, and he's got a whole host of videos. And I discovered him because he makes a series of chaos pens, and I was making chaos pens, which is lots of different exotic woods all smashed together and cut up and glued, and I'd been making pens like that, so I was aware of him anyway. So I was looking through his YouTube feed, and he had a series on kitless pens, or what I would have called a kitless pen. I think some of you would just know them as a custom pen or a bespoke pen, but kitless pens. And very fortunately, he also includes a full list of all the tools you would need to make a kitless pen. And I like a challenge, and I like to constantly develop myself and push myself and try new things. And at the time, three and a half years ago, whatever it was, there weren't that many makers that I was aware of, certainly making kitless pens, and especially not in the UK. So I invested a small amount of money in some of the cheap taps and dies and thought I'd give it a go. Managed to knock out, a handful of pieces that did look like pens. They might not have been the prettiest pens you've ever seen, but they functioned like pens and they looked like pens. And I was relatively pleased with myself enough to invest in better kit, better taps and dies, and to try and, improve things and start designing models, not, just something that looked like a pen. Posted them on my Instagram. Initially, I was working out of an Instagram account called Maker Meg because I was posting woodwork on there. I was posting, I've got leather work on there. I do a lot of craft. I had a handful of people saying, "Oh, I really like your pens. Are you making them to sell? Would you be interested in commission? A commission? I'm really looking for this or that." So what started out as, a hobby that I was doing after work, after my full-time job on an evening and a weekend as sort of a stress relief, suddenly became something that might firstly self-fund itself as a hobby, where I might, actually get some money back to put back into buying more acrylic and more tools. And if I'm honest, then the pandemic hit and that really just spiraled. I understand that, an enormous number of people struggled in the pandemic and had, a very negative experience, a very stressful experience financially and, socially, obviously. But for me, it absolutely kickstarted a business that I couldn't possibly have anticipated would be this good. It allowed, at a similar time, we'd had my daughter. She's 3.5 now, and I was due to go back to work, and I didn't want to go back to work. And this all fell very, serendipitously together and allowed me to not go back to work, and to start doing this on a more serious but part-time basis to supplement my partner's, full-time income. So that's really how it all began. And I should just say a very brief and quick thank you. There are a handful of collectors, and particularly UK collectors, who bought some of those very first pens and who posted about those pens on their Instagram accounts or on their Facebook accounts. And it was, down to those handful of first customers that gave other people the confidence to try a Black Robin pen. And without those people and that initial sort of foot in the doorway, I definitely wouldn't have a small business, and I wouldn't be able to do what I really do love doing all day, every day. So I'm very grateful to the founding pen community for that. The next thing I should probably say is I do have a Facebook account, and I know that a lot of you listening are predominantly Facebook users, but I would say that I am far more and significantly more active on Instagram. excuse me, if you haven't got Instagram, or you don't think that Instagram is for you because you don't want to post, you can be on Instagram as a voyeur. You can be on Instagram and never put a post up ever, never, have a photograph, and you can just observe other people's. And if you are a fountain pen collector and you aren't on Instagram, I would definitely advise that you do, because there's a lot of makers on there that are totally worth checking out, apart from me, obviously. So now that I'd say established, I suppose, without sounding big-headed, I have a commission list. I take commissions for pens. Generally speaking, I prefer those commissions to be based around my existing models, of which there are 10, 12 regular models that I make all the time. I'm happy on a commission to tweak those models if a customer particularly wants a thinner section or a fatter section, or a shorter barrel, longer cap, longer section. Some of you have requested longer sections. I'll come back to that, Andrew. Yes, I do work in Evernight. But my commission list at the moment is long. It isn't deliberate. It is just that I have been very fortunate that I've been very popular. So if you were looking at a commission now, I have not got any slots until June next year, I think it is now, beginning of June. As a general rule, because I only do this part-time, so I do this while my daughter's in preschool. So I do this Monday, Wednesday, Friday in the daytime, and then evenings and weekends as and when I can. But generally speaking, I try and work on 2-ish commissions a week, and I try and generate between 2 and 4 stock pens a week. Those stock pens are available for immediate purchase. I put those stock pens up on Instagram first. If they don't sell on Instagram, I occasionally list them on Facebook, but being completely honest, they always sell. I think I've probably got 3-4 pens from the last 2 years that haven't sold, and I probably could list them again and they probably would sell, but I'm holding them back in case I ever do a pen show, because I haven't got any stock. So it's not really a bad thing. Ross, you're saying, I did this as a stress reliever, but is it stressful? Do you want me to answer all these questions at the end, or do you want me to jump in with these now? I don't mind either way. There are stresses. The commission list is stressful. It's stressful when it gets long. I try to be punctual with commissions, and I try to communicate and keep people updated. So if I'm running behind, or if I'm running early, or if I get a cancellation, I try and make sure that people know and that they're not frustrated with me because they haven't heard. And I've found that literally everybody I've dealt with is always extremely understanding, as long as you tell them and as long as you're honest with them. So I always try to understand. I try never to promise something that I can't deliver. I find stock pens a lot less stressful because you can just wing it. If you're doing a stock pen and something goes slightly wrong, you take the material a little bit too deeply, you can just change the model, or you can make a slightly thinner model, or you can adjust it to suit yourself, and you can, justify that as you want. And once you've posted a photo of that pen, somebody either likes it or they don't like it, and they can choose to buy it or not buy it. That is always a bit more difficult with a commission if somebody's been very specific about the diameters that they want, or very specific about the lengths. If you don't get that right, then they might not want that pen, and that's completely understandable. So commissions are always more stressful, and it always seems to be the way that you have an accident when you've only got a limited amount of material. You never have an accident when you've got 10 rods of something in stock. It's always when you've got 1. So my advice for anybody that is interested in doing a commission with anybody is, if it is a material that's difficult to get or difficult to obtain, particularly in the UK, always send a spare blank, whoever your maker is. If they all of the makers, 99% of makers, if they haven't used that spare blank, they'll send it back to you with the finished pen, and you can keep it, save it, give it to another maker, sell it, whatever you want, or sell it to that maker. They might want to buy it off you. But if you're buying something from a specific source and you're sending it to somebody to make, I would always recommend purchasing 2. Apurva recommended that I talk a little bit about Instagram in terms of advice for selling on Instagram. One of the main reasons I sell on Instagram and don't have my own website, I saw that was a question that popped up, is because there are no fees. I take all of my payment transactions through PayPal. There's a handful of select individuals that send me a direct bank transfer because they've bought a number of pens from me and they trust me and I trust them. And that saves me paying that fee on it. And obviously they know that if anything went wrong with that pen, I would replace it. PayPal take a cut from me, which is a bit frustrating, but I appreciate that it protects me and it protects you. But I looked into a website, and not only would I need to pay the fee for keeping the website every month, however much that is, I then have to pay a percentage for selling on the website, and I still have to pay a percentage for the e-commerce aspect of the website as well. So it works out not cheaper. I'm not saying that I won't get a website, because I do recognize that there's a benefit to having everything all in one place that anybody can look at any time they want. But at the moment, I just don't have any stock to list. I've been extremely fortunate that things sell very quickly. And I keep getting asked whether or not I will do pen shows. And yes, I would love to do a pen show. I have visited pen shows. I feel very strongly that pen shows are an important part of the fountain pen community, and that they're an important place for us all to get together, to meet other like-minded people, to get a chance to feel a pen physically, not just look at a photo of it before you buy it. A chance to try it, to test weights, to test shapes and things. I get all of that, and I understand that if everybody said, oh, I haven't got enough stock for a pen show, then there wouldn't be any pen shows. My difficulty is that as an income, as doing this from a business perspective, I would have to physically stop selling on Instagram in order to accumulate enough stock to take to a pen show. There would be some advantages to that. Obviously, I would reach an audience that isn't on Instagram. A lot of you might not be on Instagram, might not be familiar with my work. So I recognize that I could reach a different audience. But at the moment, I just haven't had the luxury of enough financial stability to be able to stop, selling for 3 months in order to build up enough work, because I only do it part-time. I'm hoping that as my daughter goes off to school and I get more time, that I will be able to increase that stock, and that pen shows will be something that I can be a regular feature at. I believe there's a pen show this weekend in Sheffield, and I didn't even know that existed, and that's much closer to me than traveling to, London. So I would definitely be interested in the ones that are further up north and a bit, because I'm based in East Yorkshire, that are based over here. Andrew, you asked about materials. Because the Facebook page hasn't been updated very often, because as I said, I'm much more Instagram based. Yes, I work with a wide variety of materials. I will work with wood, but I prefer it to be stabilized. Otherwise, if it's not, then I would want to put a resin sleeve inside it to make sure that it's all not going to move, and safe from moisture, safe from leakages, safe to wash, all of those things. So I will work in wood, and will work in ebonite, although I don't love it because it's so smelly and so hard on my tools. I work on a wood turning lathe with traditional high-speed steel tools I sharpen myself. If you watch some of the American makers that are working on wood turning lathes, they would be using carbide tools, which come pre-ground and you don't need to sharpen. Anybody that has started in a background in woodworking is probably, like me, used to sharpening tools anyway, so you just get on with it. People that aren't as familiar with that would tend to go towards a carbide. A lot of the American makers and British makers also have metal lathes or an engineer's lathe. And that is definitely something that I am looking to invest in fairly quickly. We moved house 2 weeks ago, so I'm just in the process of unpacking and getting my new workshop up and running. And my new workshop is now the garage of my house rather than a dedicated workshop space, so it's taking a little bit of time to iron out the kinks. At the moment it's very cold in there, and I'm trying to work out if I can lower the ceiling and put a stud wall in and reduce the space and try and make it bearable to work in winter. So there are some hurdles to overcome before I pull the trigger on the new lathe. But yeah, happy to work in wood, happy to work in ebonite. I obviously work a lot with acrylics and resins. We've got some wonderful UK suppliers. Obviously, the Turner's Workshop is fantastic for the Conway Stewart acrylics, as well as a whole host of cellulose acetates and, resin blanks. But what makes a resin precious? What do you mean, what makes a resin precious? You mean hard to come by, or not many blanks of them? So an example would be Jonathan Brooks at Carolina Pen Company did a release of a pastel version of his primary manipulation blank. And he said when he did the release that he was only making like precious resin from Mont Blanc. I'm not sure, I'll come back to that. Let me finish this train of thought before I lose it. He did a specific number of pens and he said blanks, and he said he was only making that number of blanks and he was never making it again. So he released, I don't know, 100 pastel. Yeah, resin's another name for plastic. He released 100 of them, and once they were gone, they were gone. So they were very hard to come by. So if you were commissioning something out of that, not from me, because I'm not taking commissions on that, but the maker might be reluctant if they've only got one rod left. I can only see part of these questions that comes up. I only get like the first line. So if I'm missing something, I'm sorry. Or if you're discussing things amongst yourselves, and I'm sorry as well.
If you hit the chat button down at the bottom of the screen, it should pop up a window at the side so you can see.
That would be helpful, wouldn't it? Like, let me have a look then. All I've got at the bottom of my screen is a picture of my own face.
Oh no.
I've got a big picture of my own face as well.
Might be at the top of your screen rather than the bottom.
You could
on more chat. Okay. Yes. Okay. Right. Let me move. That's probably more helpful than my actual face, isn't it? Okay. Precious resin is right by Mont Blanc, kindly marketing bullshit. Yeah, I would say that they're just trying to make out that their pens are more precious than they possibly are, or more different from anybody else's resin pens. Resin and acrylic are slightly different. So a lot of the modern pen makers are using a resin called Alumilite, which is, it comes in two parts. It's poured together, it heats up, it forms a reaction, it goes hard. If you put it in a pressure pot, you get rid of all of the bubbles, and you can color it however you want. So there's a lot of modern pen blank makers that I'm sure you're all very familiar with. The obvious big ones are Diamond Cast by Mackenzie Pen Works, Brooks Blanks by Carolina Pen Company, but you've got new ones pushing through. There's the Pen Smiths, who's reasonably established now. You've got Tim Crow at Turnt Pen Co, who I use a lot of his materials. You've got Bob DePrass in the States, all creating some really gorgeous materials now, and all doing it well enough that those materials are reproducible, and you can be fairly sure that one pen in Ghost Koi is going to look very much like another pen in Ghost Koi, although the swirls will be different, of course. The advantage of working with resins and the advantage of working with the Alumilite blanks is that they're softer. They cut on a lathe that's a bit like butter. They're very nice to work with. They're quite forgiving. There's not a lot of chatter. They're easy to sand. They're just nice. They're just nice to work with. The acrylics, so things like the Conway Stewarts, they create a very pleasing pen, and the finished pen looks very much like a resin pen, but they are more brittle. So if you aren't gentle with some of the acrylics, you can get chip out, and you can get mistakes, and things can end up needing to be slimmer than you expected because you got a chip that you then needed to take out. So you've got to be a little bit more gentle, although some people will say that you get a better polish off an acrylic than you do off a resin. I personally think that depends on your polishing system, like anything. So another topic would be material choice and how I choose mine, and what affects that. And I think for me, one of the keys is firstly to try to appeal to a broad range of customers, because at the end of the day, that I'm trying to sell pens. My personal preference is definitely influenced in materials that I choose. I lean more towards the colourful pens and the bright colours, and that will be visible if you go through my Instagram stream. There's a lot of colour on there. I don't make very many black pens. I don't make very many solid blue, solid brown, solid colours. A lot of them are these, you know, very modern swirly materials. That's not to say that I won't work with things if people want to commission something in a more subdued colour palette. That's absolutely fine by me. I'm more than happy to do that. It just isn't where my natural eye would go. There's a fine line to tread when choosing materials, because when I started out, you know, 3-4 years ago, whenever it was, there weren't that many pen makers, custom pen makers, and there weren't that many material makers. And due to the pandemic and due to, I think, the growing popularity of custom pens, there is suddenly an influx of new pen makers and definitely of new blank makers, some better than others, of course, always. And there's a line to tread between doing what's popular and doing what everybody else is doing. And I definitely don't want to be doing what everybody else is doing, but at the same time, I want to try and do it first, I suppose, is the truth. I think the key is to try and find those new makers or those new blank, you know, makers or that new material first, and sort of set that trend and make it popular rather than jumping on the bandwagon. So an example of that would be I did a collaboration with William Shakur recently, and I wasn't the first to do the collaboration. There were 3 of us. I think it was John Twiss, obviously Dennis at Den's Pens, and myself were all approached by William and asked if we wanted to work with this synthetic opal material, this Operex synthetic opal. And it's very expensive because I believe it's got extracts of, you know, real opal in it, but essentially it's mixed into a resin that's very beautiful. But as far as I know, we were the first 3 people to use it for custom pens. I certainly haven't seen any other custom pens in it before. I made 10, Dennis made 10, I think, and I think John made 10. John did it first, and Dennis and I did it second. And one of the people, or a couple of the people that purchased those pens, managed to work out the supplier, because I didn't know the supplier. The material was sent to me by William. I made the pens, sent them back to him. He sold them. Managed to work out the supplier, managed to chase it down, and purchased more of the material for themselves, as the fountain pen community does. Everybody said, oh, that material is amazing, where did you get it? That information became open to everybody on Instagram, and now you can't go on Instagram without seeing a new maker using the Operex opal material. And it is beautiful, and it is very expensive. Because everybody's doing it, even though I was one of the earlier people to do it, I haven't really got a great interest in jumping back on that bandwagon again at the moment. That's not to say I wouldn't work with it if somebody commissioned it, and it's not to say that I won't ever work with it again, but I don't really want to be producing the same as everybody else, which leads me nicely into talking about my models and how I came up with those. So my first few pens and my first few pen models were definitely very much pen shaped. And there was definitely a cigar shape in there or 2, definitely a shape with sort of conical ends and conical finials, and, you know, obviously a very traditional taper on it. They were all quite, you know, identifiably pen shaped. And I realized that because I was working on a wood lathe and I had the freedom to do any shape that I wanted and I was comfortable with curves, I realized that there was a bit of a gap in the market, because a lot of the pen makers are using a metal lathe and curves are not as easy on a metal lathe, or so I'm told. So a customer approached me and asked me and said they were interested in something curvy, and I said I've been working on something curvy, and that's when my Ophelia model was born. And I haven't got an example with me, which was short-sighted, but if any of you have access to Instagram or have seen it, in a nutshell, it is sort of the threads, there's no step from the thread, so it's straight, and then it bulbuses out, and then it tails off to quite a violent point on the barrel, and the cap is sort of torpedo shaped and tapers off to another very sharp point. And when I first posted it, there was quite a lot of discussion. Some people, it was a bit like the Marmite pen, some people loved it, some people hated it, but gradually over the last 2 or 3 years it has become my biggest seller without any shadow of a doubt. It's the most commissioned model that I have, and it's, you know, the most popular stock pen model that I produce. So far, touch wood, there isn't another, nobody's copied it directly. There are a couple that are more similar than I would like, but nobody's copied it directly. Oh, thank you very much, Jane. Yes, you are the Ophelia customer. I think you were the first one that we did. It is the stabby one. Yes, well done, Roz. You could, you know, the pen is mightier than the sword certainly does apply to the Ophelia. Some of them are a bit sharp. After I did the Ophelia, you know, more recently, I've tried to create a curvy model that didn't have the points in case nobody wanted to be, you know, stabbed with a pen. So I've now got an Arial model and a Viola model, and they both have more subtle curves, but they're not, you know, they don't have the pointy ends for people that don't like that. And they're growing in popularity too, particularly the Arial. People seem to like that. Look, I'm definitely not claiming that I was the first person to put a curve on a pen by any stretch of the imagination, but from the custom pen makers, I think my models are a bit curvier than the offering that most people are bringing to the table at the moment. And that's been really important to me to establish myself as doing something a little bit different. And it's nice when customers post a photo of their pen trays or pen drawers or pen desks or pen koozies or whatever it is, and you can immediately identify an Ophelia, or you can immediately identify an Arial, because, you know, the other pens just don't look the same. And that's really satisfying for me, and hopefully for you guys as collectors to have something different. Yes, you do have the Viola and Calico Koi, and I love the Calico Koi. That is one of my all-time favorite materials, and I always think it's gorgeous, and I'm a little bit biased. If I make myself a pen, that it very well could be in Calico Koi. It's definitely one of my favorites. So the other thing to talk about then that I do that's different to anybody else, and I know it was touched on earlier, is the skateboard pens or the skate pens. For those of you that have seen them or those of you that haven't. And again, I cannot claim that this idea was mine. I did not invent recycling skateboards. I wish I had. I had seen wood turning and items being made out of recycled skateboards, not necessarily the full item, but even snippets of them or plugs being made out of them. 7 years ago, 8 years ago, when I first got into wood turning, I seen them, and back then 7 or 8 years ago I was making recycled skateboard kit pens, and I made a handful of them, and I definitely undercharged for them. They were a lot of work. And in a nutshell, what I do is I collect broken boards. They're always broken in one way or another. People that skate regularly, I don't know if you know this, apparently a board loses its pop, the pop that they need for kick flips, and the elasticity in the board disappears over time. So sometimes they might not appear broken, but they'll have exchanged their board or got rid of it because it's not performing like it should. So I get battered and thrashed skateboards, and everybody always asks where I get them, and the answer is they're really difficult to get. In the States, there are broken skateboards lying around everywhere. I don't think you can walk down the pavement without tripping over them because skateboarding is so enormous over there, but over here it's just not the case. My partner and I contacted skate parks, we contacted skateboard shops, we contacted skateboard clubs at universities. We've reached out to anybody that we could think of, and every year we struggle like mad to get enough skateboards in to make skateboard pens. The skateboard pens are incredibly popular. The first year I made 2 as a trial to see if I could do it. They obviously sold quite quickly. There's one of those is in the UK to a nice UK collector who has a few of my pens. The other one went abroad. The second year I made 9 of them. It started out at 12, but they break during the process. I'll come back to that in a minute. I think I released 9, and this year I made 16, and that was a real mammoth task. And next year I already have reservations for 20, 21, something like that, which is more than I wanted, but I find it very difficult to say no to people, particularly when those people are loyal customers that already have a number of my pens and customers that I know you know, have been very patient or that wanted pens this year and couldn't get on this year's list. So I'm already anxious about getting enough material to satisfy those numbers, let alone making spares. So in a nutshell, I get a broken board. I have to heat it up and remove the grip tape, which is very sticky and adhesive, and it usually leaves a horrible adhesive mess all over the top of the board. I then have to sand and remove all of that horrible adhesive, and the top tip is that WD-40 is very good for that. I have to get rid of the adhesive, I have to sand the top and get rid of any varnish that's underneath the adhesive. I then have to flip it over, I have to sand all of the back and make sure any of the paint and the artwork that was on it is gone. Then I have to cut them up into strips, about 35 mil, a little bit less, 33 mil wide. Then I have to sandwich all of those back together and glue them back together to create a very large skateboard block. And then I have to cut that skateboard block back up into pen blanks, but those blanks are massively oversized. So a typical pen blank when you make a pen is probably 20 mil diameter, 19 mil diameter, and these skateboard blocks are like, as I said, 33, 34 mil diameter. And the reason that they are so big is because when it comes to drilling them out, if there isn't enough material supporting it around the outside, they just blow apart. And it doesn't matter how long you've left them glued for, it doesn't matter how much pressure you've put them under, because I'm working at them at a 45-degree angle to get the stripes, they just come apart all the time. And every year, no matter how careful I am, I always end up losing blanks, which is very frustrating. I worked in graphics and one of the ways of taking 6 different. Yes, petrolized fluid. Yeah, WD-40 works the same, and then you can sort of scrape it off before you sand it. But yeah, that's a good tip. Although petrol might be quite smelly, as is lighter fluid. So after I've got them in blocks, I drill them out and create a resin sleeve. Get a pen blank, turn that down to fit exactly inside it. And then I epoxy glue that in. And once you've glued in the resin sleeve, that provides stability and support to those skateboards and allows you to then turn the skateboards down very, very thin. So the first couple of years I did it, they were wooden all over, but they ended up very chunky because of that, because they had to be long enough to take the internal resin sleeve. And I was nervous about how thin I dared take the skateboards without them blowing up, because I'd lost so many. This year I did the design slightly differently, and I put acrylic or resin finials on so that I could make the pens shorter, and so that I could try and reduce the sizes of them. And I created a non-flush version this year, which I think the barrels were about 15 mil diameter instead of sort of 16.5 that they had been previously. So I was happier with this year's batch that they were a more comfortable size, or a more generic size. But I know that some people preferred the look of the overall skateboard, where everything was skateboard. So after I turned them down, they then sanded and finished in a gloss CA finish, which is essentially super glue, layers and layers and layers and layers of super glue, which is then sanded back smooth and buffed to make it shiny. And that creates, with the combination of the resin sleeve inside and the gloss CA outside, a waterproof pen that is safe for washing and is safe for pen, ink leaks, and is safe for, carrying about with you every day, instead of being a piece of art that you've got to keep at home and never touch with dirty hands. So yeah, as I said, I definitely wasn't the first person to do skateboards. I believe at the moment I am the first person to have done skateboard custom pens and kitless pens. There's definitely kit pens out there, but I think I'm the first person to do kitless pens. Like anything, that will only be for so long. I'm sure somebody else will be silly enough to try and do them. There were a lot of work, so good luck to them if they want to have a go. But I'm really proud of them, even though they are hard work, and even though they are stressful, and even though the demand is enormous and I can't make everybody happy, which I am sorry for. I am proud of them. They do look fantastic when they're all lined up together, and I also love that they are recycled. I love that whilst the skateboards weren't easy to get hold of, they would have ended up in landfill, and now they are going to end up on somebody's desk for the next 10, 20, 30, however many years. And they, you know, are a piece of usable art in their own right, which, you know, is very satisfying for me. And that is sort of drawing towards the end of my notes. I mean, I could probably talk for days about days and days about pen making and about nerdy things, but it's probably a good opportunity to ask if any of you have got any questions or areas that I haven't touched on at all that you thought that I might, or an area of, you know, custom pen making that you're interested in that I haven't mentioned. Okay, how long does a pen take? Do any of my standard models post? Both good questions. So a pen tip, it's difficult to answer how long a pen takes, and it's not because I'm being coy and don't want to tell you how long I'm, you know, taking to make something that I'm charging £150 for. It's because if I started one pen tomorrow in my workshop from start to finish, and I only worked on that one pen, it would take me an awful lot longer than if I batch made a handful of 5 or 6, for example. So from a production point of view, it is definitely more sensible to do 5 sections and then to do 5, and then I would move on after I'd done the 5 sections, and I would do 5 barrel threads and the drilling and the tapping, and then I would do 5 cap threads, drilling and tapping, and then you end up with the situation where it's taken you 30 hours to make 5 pens, or 20 hours to, or whatever it is. Some models are faster to make than others. The non-flush models are generally faster because I don't have to chuck them up together and check that the, you know, the join is perfect. So I would say, and don't forget, after I've made the pen, I also have to bring it in and wash it, check it, tweak it and check all the threads and check that everything is moving smoothly, and, you know, that nothing's skipping or jumping or, you know, not going together nicely. So that takes time. Then I have to wash it again if I've had to tweak anything. I then have to photograph them, edit those photos, or, you know, put them in some kind of order, upload them to Instagram, deal with all of the inquiries about it. Then I have to package it. My whole packaging system takes a very long time. So whilst the pen might only take 4 hours to make, for example, there's definitely easily another hour, if not another 2 hours, in everything else that goes on top of that. And don't forget, I have material costs, nib costs, packaging costs. So, you know, all these new pen makers that think this is the world's most lucrative career, it definitely isn't. It is the most enjoyable career. It's certainly the most enjoyable career that I have ever done. I absolutely love it. I love every minute of it. I find it meditative. I enjoy the interactions with you guys and with the, you know, community and customers. But I'm not going to be driving a Tesla next year. So other questions. Do I have any models that post? My Juliet model, which I don't make very often because it's a smaller pen, it's not as popular, that does post, but that is the only one I make specifically that does. I have, for commissions, adjusted my Hamlet model, which is a traditional cigar shape. I can adjust that and make the barrel of that slimmer to post as well, and I have done that successfully. But generally speaking, people don't seem to be interested in postable pens at the moment. I don't know whether it's a fashion thing or if people just don't like the extra weight. Next question, what nibs do I use? I can do a Bock number 6 and a Yovo number 6. I am hoping to be able to add a Bock 8 to that very soon, but I need to try and figure out, I've got 13mm threads and I've got 14mm threads, and the corresponding section threads with those, and I need to work out whether the Bock 8 is going to fit inside the 11mm section, because if it isn't, I will have to buy the 15 threads and the 12 threads and taps and dies, and they are £200 each. From places like the Turner's Workshop and Beaufort Ink, it's like £200 for the triple start thread, so that'd be a £400 outlay just to be able to start doing the Bock 8 nibs without talking about the cost of the nibs. So I would like to be offering that, but I've just got to get unpacked in the workshop and assess whether or not I can do it. Next question, do I friction fit the nibs? No, I purchased them with a housing, and they're all screw fit. It feels safer, like less can go wrong and people can be less cross with me if anything isn't perfect. That's the truth. Because whilst my nib knowledge is improving, I'm not a nibsmith. I don't tune my own nibs yet. Having said that, I swear, hand on heart, I have not had, I think I've had one person come back to me in the last 3 years that said, your nib was a little scratchy, but it was okay after I tuned it myself or whatever. Generally speaking, I've been very fortunate, and the nibs that I've had, I've not had a lot of complaints about. If you only judge a pen by the cover it's packaged, thank you very much for saying that my pens are packaged nicely. I feel like I've put quite a lot of thought and effort into my packaging. I felt very much when I started pen making that if I was going to buy something that cost £150, I expected it to look like it cost £150. Just because something is handmade and has a lot of time into it, it should still feel, and the finished product might be beautiful and wonderful. I feel like the whole experience should still reflect that you're buying something special and something that is a treat. So I'm very grateful for the kind comments about my packaging, because I do try hard with it, and it does take me, quite a long time to put them all together. And I am glad that it is being received as I intended and that it is appreciated. Am I a fountain pen user? I definitely wasn't a fountain pen user initially. I, like everybody, I have used fountain pens, but I wouldn't have initially reached for one. My day job, I used to be an estimator, so I used to be out on construction sites on a daily basis, and a fountain pen isn't usually a great everyday carry for a construction site. Now that I make pens, I am definitely a fountain pen user. I've got one that I made for myself. I've got a handful of Lamis and Kawikas, however you pronounce that. I've got a maker pen that I got last year in the pen Secret Santa, and I'm taking part in that again this year, so I should have another custom pen in another few weeks. So yeah, I now use fountain pens fairly regularly, and I totally get the addiction. I could go out tomorrow and buy, a handful of inks that I've got my eye on. I could go out and buy a handful of pens, and very firmly entrenched in that rabbit hole, like all of you now. Do I meet up with other pen makers? I don't know if it's a secret or not. A lot of the pen makers are good friends. A lot of us talk fairly regularly, particularly through Instagram. And there is a group of us that do meet virtually on Zoom, much like you guys, and get together to talk all things pens from a making perspective. So if one of us is having an issue with buffing and can't get the finish we like, for example, we would ask each other and say, what do you guys use? What buffing compounds are you using? What's your process? So there is a group of us that do meet up fairly regularly. It started every couple of weeks, but it's probably every 3 or 4 weeks now. And share knowledge. And I'm sure you're all thinking that we talk about customers, but honestly, it doesn't really come up. We're all very conscious of data protection and of being very careful about what we say about other people. But no, we definitely get together to talk about, production and packaging and all those kind of things, which is great. And some of those makers have been instrumental in helping me, certainly and definitely at the beginning. So yes. Would I ever offer a workshop? I haven't considered it. I wouldn't be adverse to it. It would be difficult to teach somebody how to make a pen if they had no experience at all of any kind of lathe work. It would be a lot easier if somebody had was a hobbyist wood turner and just wanted guidance on how to do kit pens. That would be definitely much more achievable. We definitely share knowledge, and we definitely don't block each other. The vast majority of the other makers on Instagram are very supportive. When I was first starting out, there was a handful of people particularly that I spoke to fairly regularly, and the more established makers. So Jason Neal, Penworks, Jason there, he started probably about 6 months before me, I reached out to him and definitely asked him questions about drill bits and, you know, what sizes he was using for certain things. And he was very helpful. Dennis, you all know Dennis from Den's Pens. Dennis and I speak not every day, but a lot of days. And he was very helpful, and hopefully I've been helpful to him as well in return. Ash at Rockstar Pens, Ash and I speak, you know, on a weekly basis and touch base fairly regularly, and he has been very helpful. And, you know, again, if he ever has any questions for me, I hope that I've been helpful in return. And there's loads, but yeah, we try. The feeling is that if one of us is making really shoddy pens, if a custom maker is making a substandard pen, all that is going to do is have a knock-on effect, and it's going to discourage whichever collector receives those pens, and they're going to be discouraged from trying other custom makers. And we're very conscious of all of us trying to elevate the standard of custom pens to provide as much confidence to the community to keep using us and to keep buying from us. So, you know, we feel that it does benefit all of us if everybody is, you know, producing a better product, rather than being small-minded and thinking that everybody's a competitor, which is just not the case. Because somebody that's interested in my Ophelia model is not going to be interested in the same way in, you know, a model by Dennis that's a completely different shape. They're not looking for the same thing. So we're not really competitors, because people either like my models or they like his models, and that's absolutely fine. So, you know, it's a really nice community, and I definitely didn't realize when I started pen making how supportive it would be, because there's not, you know, I think we all know that there aren't very many communities and there aren't very many businesses and business areas that are the same. Whereas, yes, I've definitely come a long way, and it has happened very quickly and very unexpectedly, and I am very grateful. As I said at the beginning, I don't know if everybody was tuned in, I think if it wasn't for the pandemic, I wouldn't have this business. I think the number of people that suddenly had free time at home to write to people, to write to family, to write to friends, to keep in touch in an analog fashion, massively, you know, increased during the pandemic. People with suddenly a larger disposable income that weren't going on holidays, they weren't paying commuting costs, they weren't paying to socialize and to eat out and to drink out. All of those people, you know, suddenly had money that they could put into a hobby that they could participate in at home on their own. So for me, the pandemic absolutely kick-started my business, and, you know, I'm not grateful to the pandemic, but I am grateful to everybody in the community that supported me during the pandemic. Is the Ophelia my favorite stock model, or do I like them all equally? I do not like them all equally. It's not that I don't like them all equally to visually look at. I don't like them all equally to make. Some are more painful to make than others. The Ophelia is one of my favorites to make. I like all the curvy models. The non-flush caps are less stressful to make, and they don't take as much fiddling about to get that perfect close. So you can produce them. It's not quicker, it's just less stressful. The Ophelia is always satisfying, and it always looks pretty to me. It's always pretty. I really do like it, and I really do like that, you know, no other pen really looks the same in anyone's collection. I think my favorite model that is a more traditional shape is probably my Prospero model. And that was one of the very first shapes I did back in the very, very early days I did it. And at that point, I was very unfamiliar with everybody else's models. I didn't follow anybody else, hadn't really seen any other custom pen makers. It was sort of one of the second or third pens I ever made. And now that I know more about pens, I know that there are several models out there from several other makers that are very similar to my Prospero model. But at the time, I swear I didn't know. Subconsciously, I might have seen something, or, you know, I've obviously seen pens, but I didn't realize how similar it was until I got more, you know, familiar with the community and with, you know, the things available on the market. Do I have any views on Chinese pens? I own one. I've got a Moonman C2, is it? It's the clear sort of torpedo shaped eyedropper one. I've got one of those. my view on Chinese pens is if they are a gateway pen to get more people into fountain pens, then they're fine by me. If buying a fountain pen at £20, £30, £40 at an affordable price gets somebody started in it, I don't think many pen collectors are going to buy a handful of Chinese pens and then never buy a more expensive pen. I think most people are going to get more and more confident with their nibs and more confident with pen use, and have more and more inks that they need to put in pens. And I think that is only going to, it's like a gateway drug, isn't it? It's only going to open up the door to bigger and better models and pens. There are lots of nice pens out there, and as you know, there are lots of pens that perform well at smaller prices. I've got a TWSBI Eco that I like very much. I've got a number of Lammies that I like very much. They're all affordable pens. They're as affordable as some of the Chinese models. And we don't turn our nose up at those. So yeah, all pens good by me. Absolutely. And if any of you follow Permi's World on Instagram, you'll know that she's been modifying and hand painting, and I'm going to say decoupaging, but it's probably not the right term, a lot of the pen BBS, however you pronounce that. She's been buying those and doing those up because they're affordable, and turning them into pieces of art. So I believe they're reasonable writers. I haven't got one myself, and yeah, I've got nothing negative to say about them. Any more questions? How do I come up with the name Black Robin? Okay, so my surname is Blackburn, so that's where the black comes from. And my daughter is called Robin, with a Y, so that's where the Robin comes from. And I don't know if any of you have ever seen a black robin, but we don't get them here in the UK. We obviously only get red robins. But in places like New Zealand, there are lots and lots of black robins, and they're really, really cute. They look just like our red robins, but they're all black. So that's where that came from. Anyone else? Don't think I skipped any. Did I skip any questions?
I haven't seen any that you've missed. I've been keeping an eye.
Thank you.
Not a question, but thank you so much for joining and taking the time to do the talk. Thank you for putting up with me.
No,
sorry, baby.
My pleasure.
Yeah, and thank you so much. That was incredibly detailed, and you've been going for the better part of an hour, which is incredible. That was really, really thorough.
I didn't want to check my watch and look rude. I told you I could go on. It's really difficult. It's really difficult not to be patronizing. As I said briefly at the start before everybody joined, some of you will be familiar with my pens and be familiar with my models. Some of you will know a lot about custom pen making. You might have watched videos on YouTube. You might have watched reels that other pen makers have made and put on Instagram, and some of you might know absolutely nothing about it at all. So it's very difficult to pitch any kind of talk at everybody and to cover everything. The cat, everyone wants to see the cat. Here's the cat. Here's one of the cats. This is Juno. She's my blue Siamese. She's about 10 now. She's quite old. She's very beautiful. Very demanding. I'm being passed another cat. This is my other cat. This is Missy. Missy is a lilac oriental. And for those of you that didn't know, orientals and Siamese can be born in the same litter. They are exactly the same, except for an oriental hair is fully coloured all the way along, and a Siamese hair is only coloured on the tip. But you can have a litter of kittens that will have a mixture of both in.
That's incredibly cool. That's really interesting.
Who knew?
Oh, we've got a couple more questions that have rolled in.
Okay. How do I decide what blanks to buy? It's definitely guided by what I like. Sometimes it's guided by what I'm asked for. Some people will ask for materials and I think, God, I don't like that. But if they want to commission something in it, then I will buy it. Often I try to buy things that I think are going to be cool before other people do it. So a lot of the Tim Crow stuff from Turnt Penco he was one of the new makers, and I knew him personally through one of our pen group Zooms. He was introduced to me there, and I wanted to support him and get him started. And I like to think that certainly in the UK, I was the only person buying his blanks initially, and that is not the case anymore. And I'm trying to do things first. It's the same with when I started using the Bob Dupress materials, and Bob doesn't have a website. So if you will only know Bob's stuff if you've been on Instagram and seen other people making pens. Again, there was nobody, when I started, there was nobody else in the UK using Dupress materials. Dennis doesn't use them because he mostly uses his own stuff. Ash doesn't use them. And, there weren't a lot of other UK pen makers at the time. Now, I definitely don't have the monopoly on that. The Brooks stuff, again, not a lot of people were using that, and now everybody is using that, particularly over here. So I try and choose things that are popular, but not things that have been done to death. That's, it's in a nutshell, but I'm happy to be guided. If people know of another blank maker, I've got my eye on a couple. So I did some pens with the Dank blanks materials, and they're amazing to look at. But after working with them, they're quite brittle. So in order to get the separation in the colours, I think they have to leave the resin quite late to pour it together so that it doesn't mix. And that creates a change in the heat, which creates a more brittle pen blank. So they were beautiful when they were finished, but they were painful to work with, which is why I haven't ordered more yet. So that has to be, borne in mind as well. Have I been tempted to try the skateboard method with any other type of reclaimed wooden items? Could technically be used to do other materials. It can be used for some of the materials. I have done it with plywood. I've done plywood pens, particularly when I did kit pens, and I've done the chaos pens, which is only the same thing. You're just laminating different types of wood together. You can turn pretty much anything, whether or not it is. So I've seen somebody that did a leather pen that's turned leather, that compressed a lot of leather together and tried to turn that. You can turn pretty much anything as long as you can make it hard enough. So if you impregnated it with resin, then you could do that. Whether you'd want to and whether it would look nice at the end is a different matter. Do I charge more for a commission pen? No, not at all. I charge exactly the same. I don't know whether I should do. I don't know whether I should charge more, but I don't. I didn't feel like somebody should come to me for a commissioned Ophelia and I should charge them £170, and then they might see an Ophelia for sale, exactly the same model, exactly the same material, the next day for 150. That didn't feel fair, particularly not after they've waited 6 months for that pen in the first place. So no. A question I get asked a lot is, people will see a pen I've made and they'll ask me if I can recreate the same pen. Yes, within reason. I don't mind making something I've already made. I try not to make hundreds of them. I don't really want to make 10 pens, 20 pens, all in the same material, all in the same model, all going out at a similar time so that everybody's got one the same. I prefer the idea that things are more unique. I appreciate that every material is slightly different and that they're all going to look slightly different with the different displacement of colours and swirls and things. But I don't really want to get into that sort of production mind where everybody's got one the same. I want people to feel like the piece, particularly if it's commission, that they've asked for is their pen, it's their design, it's their choice. So yeah. What else? Any other questions, anybody? Gone on and on and on. But I could keep going on and on and on.
I know that feeling. I think pretty much everyone who has had an opportunity to get questions in now. So I think we should probably call it there. Thank you so much.
You're very, very welcome. Thank you.
This was incredible, comprehensive, just really accessible, no jargon. This was really, really lovely to hear and listen to. Thank you so much, Meg. This was a fantastic presentation. And it was lovely to have you here.
Thank you very well. Thank you very much for having me. I didn't even know you guys did this every year. I was invited recently by Key to a FPUK thing down in London that I would very much have liked to have attended, but we were literally moving house like the week later. It just did not fall well in the end at all. But hopefully I might see some of you in actual real life either at another meeting or at one of the upcoming pen shows in the next 12 months. That would be nice.
We do have Yorkshire meets. I'm in West Yorkshire, so
Well, that would be brilliant, because so we're over in East Yorkshire in near Hull-ish, nicer than Hull, but near Hull. But yeah, Leeds is only an hour away.
right. My sister used to live in Eastrington.
I don't know where that is.
Oh, right, okay, it's outside the Hull. It was a good bet.
Yeah. No, we're in Beverley.
I think this is probably a good time to announce our prize winners for this session. So thank you to Hamilton Pens for sponsoring this session. I'll do the announcement while we're still on the recording, and then I will end the recording. We can all just chat and natter. So today we have two prizes, as Steph announced at the beginning. We have the Kawiko Pearl Ornament, and we have the Pearlet Irishizuku Takasumi ink. And today the ornament is going to Ros Howe. So well done, Ros. Please message me with your address and I will get that to you. I'm going to get that sorted out. And the ink is going to Daniel Doveco. I think I've said that right. Doveco. So that's the Takasumi ink. So if you can both message me and I will get your addresses over to Hamilton, and your prizes will be underway.
I don't have a Christmas tree.
Oh,
And I'm not a Queco fan, so do you want to redraw that one? It seems better for someone else to have it who would appreciate it.
I can quickly redraw if you're absolutely fine with us. Are you sure?
Of course I am.
Okay, 1 second then.
You could wear it as an earring, Rose.
No, you're all right, thanks. The thought of having glass by my jugular vein doesn't quite do it for me.
So,
Fair enough.
as it happened,
Shame it wasn't the ink.
that was a number 5. That was Andrew Chorley. There we go. Yeah, just checking all my listings. Yes, there you go. That was Andrew. So well done, Andrew. So if you can both drop me if Daniel and Andrew, you can drop me your addresses, I will get that to Hamilton. They will be in the post to you.
Are you even a fountain pen fan if you haven't got a fountain pen on your Christmas tree?
Don't have a Christmas tree.
No, that's what you're off the hook.
You've been disqualified now, Rose.
I don't do any Christmas decorations because it's just me.
That's fair enough. Oh, thank you, Daniel. Yeah, wonderful.
I don't either, but I would have worn it as an earring.
What, to go with your sparkly sequin dress?
Exactly. Nice and sparkly weekend attire.
And your Louis Vuittons.
Save that for the Christmas party on the 17th.
You've been warned.
There is a prize for the best Christmas outfit, so.
Well, certainly worst taste. I don't know if that equates to best if you topsy-turvy it, but.
So we have a monthly get together. We have the event at Christmas, Meg, but we also have a monthly get together that we just get together first Friday of every month, and whoever's around just get together and talk pens and have the occasional glass of wine and
Sounds
good.
with me.
Yeah, show what you've bought. Enable other people into buying things that they didn't want or need. Until
Oh yes.
Yeah,
Very much.
that sounds about right.
Is the
No, that was
recording
really,
still going,
really
Hayes?
interesting. Thank you very, very much.
I am going to stop the recording now. Thank you very much, everybody.
You're very welcome.